From the 1930s to the 1950s, the French company of Batignolles-Châtillon, based in Nantes on France's western coast, had several tries at designing tanks for the French army. In the 1930s, the company produced a light infantry tank prototype as well as the DP-2 amphibious light tank. After the end of the German occupation of France, the company again produced a light tank for the program, which would result in the AMX-13, this being the Batignolles-Châtillon 12 tons, and ultimately created the Batignolles-Châtillon 25 tons, a lightweight medium tank prototype in the 1950s. None of Batignolles-Châtillon's tanks were adopted by any military, with their most notable influence on service French vehicles being experience gained in the 25-ton project being used for the development of the AMX-30. In recent years though, Batignolles-Châtillon's designs, though almost exclusively the post-World War II ones, have received newfound attention due to the inclusion of first the 25 tons and later the 12 tons to Wargaming's popular online game World of Tanks, with the 25 tons notably being praised for its peculiar gameplay for years. Wargaming's care about historical accuracy of the Batignolles-Châtillon vehicle is, however, very lackluster to say the least, with the recent Bourrasque premium tank being the worst offender, combining real elements of the 12 tons project, of which development ended in September of 1951, with an inaccurately modeled turret from the 1970s. Welcome to a new Tank Encyclopedia voiced article. I'm your host Stan, and today we're making sure that Wargaming hates us. Well, we don't hate Wargaming. Their World of Tanks game has brought a lot of enthusiasts to the field, but they do make mistakes, sometimes intentionally, and we feel obliged to call them out on it. If you do like our content and want to help us, because Wargaming will never sponsor us at this rate, please do consider donating on Patreon or PayPal. You can find links in the description. With that said, let's get back to the Bourrasque. In December of 2019, a new premium French light tank was added to Wargaming's Super Test servers. It was then marketed as the Batignolles-Châtillon Model 54. After a few minor tweaks, the vehicle, identical in appearance, was added to all servers in May of 2020 under the new name Batignolles-Châtillon Bourrasque. This vehicle features a modified version of the GIAT TS90 turret used on vehicles such as the ERC-90 Sagaye, mounted on the hull of a Batignolles-Châtillon competitor to the project, which would become the AMX-13. The 12T Model 1954 designation, which was used at first, while it may seem in accordance with the French Army's designation system, is absolutely ahistorical. Development did not continue on the Batignolles-Châtillon 12 tons following the end of its trials in September of 1951. And seeing as AMX's project ended up being adopted, becoming the AMX-13, continued developments on Batignolles-Châtillon's hull would have been redundant. Wargaming's fake description of the Bourrasque is the following: a project of a French tank developed by Batignolles-Châtillon. The vehicle was to receive a two-man turret upgraded to accommodate a 105mm gun. Existed only in blueprints. Bullshit. It ought to be noted that, while a prototype of the 12 tons was manufactured, it does not match the one present in World of Tanks. The 12-ton prototype used 4 large road wheels, 2 return rollers, and a torsion bar suspension. Wargaming's hull is instead based on one which existed only on paper, though it was projected both for a light tank and a self-propelled anti-aircraft gun. This hull uses 7 interleaved road wheels in a fashion that reveals the considerable German influence on France's first post-war designs. An idler and drive sprocket are also present, but there are no return rollers. The type of suspension used would most likely be torsion bars. On this whole project, dated from the late 1940s, early 1950s, Wargaming decided to mount an absolutely unrelated turret, the GIAT TS90. Introduced by GIAT in 1977, this is a welded two-man turret with a manually loaded 90mm anti-tank gun, at least in its historical configuration. This fairly light turret could theoretically be mounted on any vehicle that could accommodate a sufficiently large turret ring as well as weigh at least 7.5 tons. In practice, it is mounted on the ERC-90 for the French Army and Export, VBC-90 for the French Gendarmerie and Oman, and on the AMX-10, creating the AMX-10P PAC-90 for export. A variety of other vehicles, such as the MOAG Piranha or even the M113, were modified to mount the turret but never went beyond prototype stage with it. In itself, the basic characteristics of the TS-90 turret would likely make it compatible with a modified Batignolles-Châtillon 12-ton hull, but it is obviously highly anachronistic. The turret, as well as the CN-90F4 anti-tank gun that features as its main armament, were a 1970s development, using technologies that did not exist or were not widely in use at the time when the 12-ton was being developed. However, while the turret Wargaming mounted on the Bourrasque is based on the GIAT TS-90, it was added to the game in a modified form that obviously favors gameplay over historical accuracy. In real life, the TS-90 is a two-man turret with a manually loaded 90mm gun. In this form, it is already quite cramped. Wargaming, however, swapped out the turret's 90mm CN-90F4 for the older but larger 105mm D1504, or known as the CN-105-57. The 105mm gun featured, for example, on the Israeli M51 Sherman, the AMX-13-105, or the SK-105 Cuirassier. This new gun is fed by a 2-round autoloader, the type of which Wargaming did not care to specify. One could note that, while being older in comparison to the TS-90 turret, this gun would still have been anachronistic if Wargaming kept the Model 1954 designation, seeing as it was first introduced in 1957. Wargaming's 105mm armed version of the TS-90 is visibly extended towards the rear, likely to model the 2-round autoloader that features in-game. Though the large turret extension towards the rear would likely be large enough for an autoloader, particularly a small 2-round one, the larger breech of the 105mm CN-105-57 in comparison to the 90mm CN-90F4 would likely reduce the space available for the crew. Historically, there are no known projects that aim to mount a 105mm gun in the TS-90 turret. Light vehicles contemporary with its development typically use the TK-105 Freeman turret featured on the AMX-10RC. This turret mounts a more modern 105mm Mecha F2 L48 low-pressure gun, a far more modern gun than the CN-105-57 featured on the Bourrasque. Interestingly enough, Wargaming does not call this turret the TS-90 or a variation of this designation such as TS-105. Instead, it is called Panhard EBR S-105. This likely is linked to the fact that the same fake turret was mounted in another French mishmash present in World of Tanks, the EBR-105. It misses the fact that Panhard rarely, if ever, designed turrets, with its vehicles instead using turrets from 5 Lille in the early Cold War and GIAT or Nexter after the 1970s. Officially, the Bourrasque does not have any specified weight. Due to being a premium vehicle, it has a set of components with no need to progress and change some of them, and as such, the weight mechanic present in other World of Tanks vehicles would be useless there. Nonetheless, seeing as we know the specified power of the Bourrasque's engine as well as its horsepower to weight ratio, one can easily deduce the weight of the vehicle. The Bourrasque has a 310 horsepower engine, which is also historically questionable, and a power to weight ratio of 25 horsepower per ton, giving it a weight of 12.01 tons, almost exactly 12 tons. It ought to be noted that the actual weight of the Batignolles-Châtillon 12 tons is unknown, even more so for the one using the same hull as Wargaming, seeing as it stayed on paper. However, it is quite likely that, equipped with the FL-10 turret, it would have exceeded the requested weight of 12 tons, as did the AMX project that became the AMX-13. Fitted with an enlarged TS-90 turret that features a larger 105mm CN-105-57, it is impossible that the Bourrasque would realistically have a weight of almost perfectly 12 tons. The maximum speed achieved by the Bourrasque in World of Tanks is 62 km per hour. In short, the Bourrasque featured in World of Tanks can be described as a mishmash of a late 1940s, early 1950s hull with a modified late 1970s turret that mounts a late 1950s gun. The historicity of such a combination is non-existent. Even the turret and gun are not known to have ever been considered together, and mounting them on the hull of a vehicle that was out of consideration for years by the point they were developed could be described as nonsensical. As for why Wargaming created such a vehicle, while no official answer has been given, one could imagine that a very easy to make vehicle that uses the name of Batignolles-Châtillon, which was quite the reputation in World of Tanks, may have seemed very attractive to Wargaming when they were considering a French high-tier premium tank. The Bourrasque is far from the first fake vehicle featured in World of Tanks though. Many such fabrications are present in the game, and about some of them you can actually read on our website. One could for example cite most Chinese tank destroyers, or the FV-215B, Conqueror gun carriage, and Carnarvon Action 10. France has not been spared either, with another fake mishmash in the form of the EBR-105 that uses the same turret as the Bourrasque. That's all for this video. Make sure to follow our website, we'll be releasing new articles on the regular. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Reddit, and if you use Discord, there's a link to our community server in the description. Also, likes, comments, and subscriptions on YouTube are greatly appreciated. If you would like to help us continue to develop and expand, also consider donating on Patreon or PayPal. All of the funds will be used to help us enhance and design new articles and features for you. Until next time, keep us in your sights.